Hi, I'm Dan from AOS Shorts, and in this video I'm going to break down a tournament-winning Daughters of Khaine list. This is going to be the first in a series of videos where I take tournament-winning top army lists and I break them down so you can see how they work and how they can be countered. So today we have Papinniemi's Khailebron Daughters of Khaine list that recently won Goldcon. So Goldcon was a 52-player, 6-round event on the Gold Coast of Australia, and Corey took it out with his list called the Queen's Gambit. So the Daughters of Khaine are getting a new battle tome soon, but it's still worth breaking down the list and seeing how it works and the effort that Corey put into building the list. There's a lot of key lessons that can be taken away. So let's learn about the Queen's Gambit. So the Queen's Gambit, as Corey defined it, was a hyper-aggressive Daughters of Khaine list that uses multiple teleportation options and a large unit of 20 Bloodstalkers to put significant pressure on your opponent. Yes, the list is light on wounds, it's only got 112 wounds, but it still has 70 bodies and a key combat threat in the Shadow Queen. It's got 5 teleportation options with the Khailebron Mistress of Illusion command trait, the Mirror Dance spell, Lortian the Soul Seeker Endless spell, and 2 units of Khainite Shadow Stalkers. So this list can really be where it needs to be, when it needs to be there. As it's a shooting hammer list, you really need to pay attention to what your opponent's threats are and the key opponent pieces that you want to take out in the order that you want to take them out. So let's pull up the list. So as you can see, as I've mentioned, it's a Khailebron Daughters of Khaine list. The general is a Blood-Racked Medusa with, as I said, the Khailebron command trait, Mistress of Illusion, the Shadowstone artifact, which increases the reliability of its casting, and the Law of Shadows Mirror Dance spell, which we will get into. It's a teleportation. So it's also, in terms of rounding out the heroes, it's got Khaine. She's got the Mind Razor spell because, of course, and the Shadow Queen, which you need to take. In terms of the battle line units, there are 3 units of 10 Sisters of Slaughter. They've got Barbed Whips and Blade Bucklers. They're the perfect screening units for this list. 2 units of Shadow Stalkers, which I mentioned, and then that big shooting hammer of 20 Bloodstalkers. In the Endless spells, it's Lortian the Soul Seeker, Burning Head, and an extra command point to round out at 2,000 points. So let's talk about the opening move and the potential threat that this Queen's Gambit list has. So the threat, when you think about it, is the Mistress of Illusion command trait allows you to teleport those 20 Bloodstalkers anywhere on the board 9 inches away from your opponent. Khaine can cast Lortian the Soul Seeker and move herself in the boat. She's only going to take 3 wounds, so she's not going to be removed from play, and she's going to be reset up somewhere wholly within 24 inches of the Stalkers, and that's where you want her to be, because you want her to be able to activate her command ability. So the Khaine command ability on the scroll will allow the Stalkers to shoot in the hero phase as well as the shooting phase. So the Stalkers are then going to shoot with their 40 shots, unmodified to hit rolls of 6s are going to turn straight into mortal wounds rather than having to roll for wound or damage. And you're then going to use the Blood-Racked Medusa with the Shadowstone for bonuses to cast Mirror Dance. Mirror Dance is going to allow you to swap Khaine for the Shadow Queen. So you've taken Khaine, you put her back somewhere safe back into your lines, and you've put out your aggressive combat threat of the Shadow Queen nice where you want it. The Shadow Queen is then not restricted, can move in the movement phase to get even closer to where she needs to be, and then the Stalkers get to shoot again in the shooting phase. So that's another 40 shots with mortal wounds on 6s. So that is a lot of hurt. Now this is the threat that the army gets. As we'll see when we get into Corey's games, you don't always get it on the table, but it's a threat which has to be accounted for. So let's go and take into the list in more detail. So it's a Khailebron list. So as a general ability for Khailebron units, you get the concealment and stealth ability, which means that those units are -1 to hit in the shooting phase. So some extra protection from your main threats at the moment in terms of KO, skink shooting, variety of other things that are currently in the shooting heavy matchup. The Mistress of Illusion command trait, which we've already talked about. So that's where at the start of the hero phase, you can pick a friendly Khailebron unit within 7 inches of this general. If that unit's more than 3 inches from any enemy models, which it will be at the start of the game, then you can remove it from the battlefield and set it up anywhere on the battlefield more than 9 inches from any enemy models. The unit cannot move in your next movement phase. Now, if you've done that on the Bloodstalkers, you don't really care because you're not trying to bring them any closer in. You just want to get them into a position where they can shoot with their 24-inch range to get the threats that they need to get. It's worth just touching on the general Daughters of Khaine rules and their allegiance abilities if you're unaware of them. So everything in the army is going to have a 6-up ward save to wounds and mortal wounds, and then they have the Blood Rights table, which is a series of abilities which get added through each turn of the game, and importantly when you get to sort of turns 3, 4, 5, you're getting reroll hit rolls of 1, reroll wound rolls of 1, and reroll save rolls and immune to battle shock. So as Corey is playing the game, or any Daughters of Khaine player is playing the game, they're becoming stronger in those later turns when they need to be getting those last objectives and the board starts getting messy. So the Bloodrack Medusa was Corey's general. So the key things here was that he took the Shadowstone artifact, which allows him to re-roll dice rolls of 1 that is made as part of the casting roll for the bearer. In addition, you can add 1 to the casting roll if the bearer attempts to cast a spell from the Law of Shadows, which Mirror Dance and the others are. So the Mirror Dance spell has a casting value of 4. So with that plus the bonuses, I think the Mirror Dance has a 0.176% chance of failing. As long as you're outside of unbound range and various other things. So casting value of 4, if successfully cast, then you pick 2 friendly Daughters of Khaine heroes within 24 inches of the caster. So as long as neither hero is within 6 inches of any other unit, the 2 models can swap positions on the battlefield. Neither can be set up within 3 inches of any enemy units. So you're going to be switching Morathi Khaine and the Shadow Queen and getting Shadow Queen right into the opponent's lines. Quite often how Corey was wanting to play this was using the using the Bloodstalkers to punch a hole through the opponent's front lines, maybe the screening units, and clear a way for the Shadow Queen to come through into the middle of the opposing army and really tie it up. So let's have a look at Bloodstalkers. Bloodstalkers are the bow snakes. They got a significant upgrade in Broken Realms Morathi with getting an extra attack. So now each has a 24-inch range, 2 attacks, hitting on 3s, wounding on 3s, -1 rend and 1 damage. Importantly, if the unmodified hit roll for an attack made with the Heartseeker bow is a 6, then that attack inflicts 1 mortal wound on the target and the attack sequence ends. Important to note, this is no longer in the shooting phase that this procs, so you can ignore that bit in the old Daughters of Khaine FAQ, which will be replaced in the new book, so you do get mortal wounds in the hero phase. So half the time, if you run those numbers, and I'm going to pull up the average damage table now, and then the cumulative damage probability against the 4-up armor save, and you'll see that half the time you're doing at least 15 damage to a 4-up save target from a single volley, and of course you're going to have 2 volleys in your turn. So you're going to have 80 shots, you're going to be doing at least 30 damage on average to 2 different targets, or 1 target if you really want, if it's a really strong or heavy unit in terms of wounds. Now that shooting only gets stronger with Burning Head. This tournament was played in Akshi, so Burning Head is going to get a bonus anyway because it's an Akshi spell. But in relation to the Bloodstalkers, it's allowing those Bloodstalkers to reroll hit rolls of 1 to increase their effectiveness. So against the 4-up save, that unit on full strength goes from doing 15 damage on average to doing 18 damage. So you get a few more, 3 more damage on average against the 4-up save. So let's move on to the big bad Morathi Khaine. So the Worship Through Bloodshed command ability is an amazing command ability. It's the command ability on the scroll. That's the one that allows you to pick a nearby Daughters of Khaine unit wholly within 24 inches and have them either shoot or fight as if it was, or either shoot or fight immediately in the hero phase. So the key thing here, she's a Supreme Spellcaster, so she's got 3 casts and 2 unbinds, +1 to cast, unbind and dispel. Now, she's not as strong as any of the what would be called the spell doms, Teclis behind me, Nagash, or some of the others, Croak even, who are more powerful spellcasters, but still she's giving you a strong level of reliability and lots of options for your casts. So she's got Mind Razor on her. It's casting value of 7. So if successfully cast, you pick a friendly Daughters of Khaine unit within 18 inches of the caster, and until the start of your next hero phase, the rend characteristic of that unit's melee weapons is improved by 1, and in addition, if they have a higher bravery characteristic than the unit that they are attacking, and then the damage characteristic of the unit's melee weapons is increased by 1 while attacking. So the perfect target for this spell is the Shadow Queen. So the Shadow Queen is going to have all of her melee weapon attack profiles increased, significant increase in damage output. She's going to be, on her main attack, she's going to be -3 rend and 4 damage, and she is bravery 10. So unless you're playing against undead or Coalesce or against some of the Seraphon builds, then you're always going to have higher bravery, so you're always going to be getting off that extra damage. Morathi Khaine is also going to be able to cast Lauchon, the Soul Seeker, so that's the Bringy Dingy or the Ferryman, which we discussed earlier, which allows you to pick up a nearby unit, and in this case Morathi Khaine. So important things to note for this list build: Lauchon the Soul Seeker can't be used to pick up the Shadow Queen. The Shadow Queen can't get wholly within 3 inches of the Endless Spell model, so can't be teleported. The 20 Bloodstalkers also are too big in terms of footprint of their bases to get within 3 inches. I understand a 15-man unit of the Bloodstalkers would be able to, but a 20-man is too big. Morathi Khaine can also either in the first turn, depending on the circumstances, or in later turns when she has the spell slots available, can cast Burning Head. Importantly, things to note: Morathi in this circumstance is not only incredibly resilient from the fact that she has her Iron Heart of Khaine, which means that her and the Shadow Queen are only going to be taking 3 wounds a turn. She's also going to be -3 to hit in this list. So she's naturally -1 to hit due to her Commanding Presence ability on her War Scroll. She's another -1 to hit from shooting because of Khailebron. And then if she gets Lookout Sir, then she's also going to be -3 to hit. So incredibly hard to take her out from shooting if she's well positioned. Let's move on to the Shadow Queen. So as we all know, the Shadow Queen is now a perfect combat monster and a great target for Mind Razor, because her Heartrender profile, which is her main melee profile, is going to go up to -3 rend and damage 4. So what does that mean? That means that on average, against a 4-up armor save unit, her damage output increases from 12 damage to 21. So significant impact from getting the Mind Razor spell off. And if we just think about the probabilities of that Mind Razor spell getting off on a 7 with +1, and if you've got some arcane or other things near Morathi Khaine, then you've got a strong chance of getting it off. Not as good as some of the other spells, but a strong chance of getting it off. So I'm just going to pull up in front of you when we talk about Mind Razor and Shadow Khaine and the Shadow Queen. Here are the average damages and the cumulative damage probabilities. So this table is showing you the cumulative percentage of the chance of the damage that you're going to be doing. So if we're looking at a 4-up save without Mind Razor, then there's a less than 10% chance that you're going to be doing 20 damage in combat. You're more likely to be in a single combat turn. You're more likely to be doing around the average of around 12. But with Mind Razor, it significantly increases. And it's also important to note that with the Shadow Queen's 3 melee profiles, her damage output is fairly consistent. You see from the cumulative damage probability, it's not particularly swingy. There's not large jumps, so her output is fairly consistent. So let's just move on to some of the other tech pieces of the list. So there's the Khainite Shadowstalkers. These are the new favourite unit of Daughters of Khaine and anyone that can ally them in. They are one, incredibly cheap for what they are. Two, they can teleport anywhere across the board effectively. So let's break that down. So the Shadow Leap ability allows you in your movement phase to, instead of making a normal move, you can say that the Shadow Stalker's unit is going to Shadow Leap. So if you do so, you remove the unit from the battlefield and set it up anywhere again on the battlefield more than 9 inches away from enemy units. So it's similar to the Tree Rev and then the unit from the Sylvaneth Battle Tome. Their Cursed Missiles do mortal wounds on 6s to hit. They're -1 to hit in melee, so stacking that with Khailebron, they're going to be -1 to hit from shooting and -1 to hit from in combat. And so they're a very, very flexible unit, especially in the late game. They can either, if you need them, can be used as screens in the first game, in the early turns of the game, and to keep people honest with the options to teleport in the late game. So thinking about how you deploy them, you can set them back on the backboard edge during deployment, and depending on how the opponent moves and if they take the first turn, you can move the Shadow Stalkers with a teleport to get them up into an extra screen if you need to protect more units, to react to your opponent's deployment, or if they've left a gap or haven't covered off an objective, then you can move them up to where they need to be. So it's incredible flexibility in order to react to your opponent's deployment. In terms of that, keeping your opponent honest in terms of where they place their units. Opponents can often place a unit so that it simply tags an objective. They might be out of position, they might only be able to run a couple of models onto objective, they might be 5.9 inches or 5.8 inches or 5.5 inches or whatever from the edge of the objective, and they count it. But they can't afford to do that now if you've got the threat of the Shadow Stalkers, because you can still teleport that 10 or that 9 strong unit to be somewhere outside of 9 inches, but still within the zone of capturing that objective. So opponents have to be much more honest, they have to babysit their home objectives much more when you've got Shadow Stalkers in the list. And finally, the other tech piece is Sisters of Slaughter. So they're again a very good screen. They can be strung out in front of your lines, as we'll see when we get to the deployment analysis. They've got a 6-inch pile-in, so even though they're a screen, they can come in if something light comes into them. They've got a 5-up save due to the bucklers, and they're going to be bouncing mortal wounds back in the combat phase when they roll saves of 6s. So you're going to get a few extra damage out of that. So let's move through to the matchups and look at what Corey faced. So in round 1, he faced Tim Davis, his Legion of Asgore. Tim finished 42nd in the tournament, and they played in total conquest. I'm not going to go through all the scores, you can see them. Corey did rather well. Henry Wagner in round 2, Seraphon Thunderlizard list, 26th overall and Scorched Earth. Then he started facing some of the hard matchups. Dave Kerr with his Slaves to Darkness, Knights of the Empty Throne list. Dave's a previous Australian master, very good player. He came 3rd, and they played in focal points. Then round 4, Jai Callanan, a Slaanesh God Seekers list, which came 16th on total commitment. Round 5, he played Pat Carter with a KO Zilfin Grunstock Escort Wing list. Pat came 2nd. He did very well with the KO list. Corey probably got the most perfect scenario that he would have wanted to face that KO list in, which is Knife to the Heart. And it was the best in terms of Corey's deployments and what the KO player was going to have to do. And then finally in round 6, he played Eddie McMichael, who was running a Stormcast Eternals list with 8 Desolators. Eddie finished 10th overall, and they was playing Enforcing the Hand. So thinking about those games, Corey informs me he only had to use Lauchon, the Soul Seeker, in 1 game. The threat of the move did enough. So it pressured opponents to take the first turn due to the possible power projection. So that gave the threat of that power projection made up for the fact that Corey's Queen's Gambit list is a 9-drop. So he wasn't going to have the choice, but he was making a difficult question for opponents, so they were going to have to choose to take the first turn. Then what would happen is if they moved forward, then Corey didn't have to rely on all the teleports or Lauchon, because his key damage pieces were going to be close enough to his opponent's army. So they were either going to be things within 24-inch threat range of the Bloodstalkers, or things that the Shadow Queen was going to be able to move up 14 inches and then make a turn. Make a charge, sorry. This is especially the case in the fact that there were several scenarios with an 18-inch deployment. So it meant that the Shadow Queen was going to be close enough, or the snakes could shoot out screens to clear opponents' lines in order to make space for the Shadow Queen to come through. So across the 6 games, Corey got choice of first turn twice out of the 4, and in the other 4, each of them the opponent chose to go first. So in terms of Corey's deployment, I'm just going to pull up some of the pictures taken from the Failed Charge stream over the weekend. And so these are pictures from Corey's games in round 3, round 5 and round 6. And as you can see, the key things for Corey here, and he did a lot of practice of deployment on his own and in practice games before the event to make sure he got it just right, because of all the need for the various synergy pieces to be in the appropriate distances from each other. You'll see that he was deploying his main casters outside unbound range. So in each of these different turns, he is deploying his main pieces effectively back on the backboard edge. So the casters are back there out of unbind range unless he's facing Croak or something with a board wide unbind. He keeps the Shadow Queen 6 inches away from anything from Mirror Dance, but not so far back that it's out of the action if the opponent does take first turn and bubbles up. So there's a delicate positioning with the Shadow Queen to make sure that she is back but not too far back, so that Corey can react to the opponent. Morathi Khaine's got to be wholly within 24 inches of where the snakes are likely to be, so you need to think about that when you move Morathi Khaine up, and you've got to keep Morathi Khaine and the Shadow Queen close enough so that Morathi Khaine can cast Mind Razor on Shadow Queen. So as you can see, it's very much a reactive counter deploy list with all the key pieces sitting back and then moving out on turn 1 or turn 2 as needed, depending on how the opponent deploys and moves on their turn 1. So let's move into some challenging matchups. Let's think about what was hard or going to be hard for Corey's list. So the obvious one is Deepkin. Deepkin is normally a hard counter for a hammer shooting list, because with their Forgotten Nightmares ability, they're effectively turning off shooting. They're going to force you to shoot the nearest unit. That might be 3 Aetherwings. So Deepkin player doesn't care. And the Turtle and the Unrendable Eels means that the Daughters of Khaine list would be heavily reliant on mortal wounds. So what did Corey do anticipating this matchup? That is why he added Burning Head. He added Burning Head not just for the rerolls for 1 shooting, he also added it in for the fact that it was going to do some mortal wound damage, and because this event is being played in Akshi, it gets a boost to that, so it's going to be doing D3 plus 1 mortals. So otherwise, Corey informs me he would have dropped the spell and it would have gone for the Triumph instead. Other things that were going to cause him trouble: a KO list, probably in a scenario other than the knife. The KO lists are going to have lower drops, they're going to give away the first turn. Khailebron's -1 to hit isn't really an issue for KO because of all of their buffs to shooting, and they're just going to do enough damage output that they're going to take the Stalkers off the table, or they're going to take some other key piece off. Other things, Seraphon, as we mentioned, Croak with the auto unbind means that there's going to be real trouble for getting off those synergy pieces. So you're going to have to be putting, if you're Corey, you're going to have to be putting the Shadow Queen much more forward to be active. But if they give you, from Corey's perspective, if the Seraphon player gave the Daughters of Khaine player the first turn, then the 80 shots from the Bloodstalkers are going to be enough to take Croak off, even if Croak has got 5 Temple Guard, like they would like a Seraphon player would normally have. So the Seraphon player is still going to have to take first turn. If you're thinking about Corey's list and where the weak points are, the key one is the Bloodrack Medusa. Everything comes across that. It's quite a squishy hero. and opponents, if they've got long range shooting or even a combat threat that can bounce over, then they can get into the Blood-Rack Medusa. So yes, that Blood-Rack Medusa is probably going to be -2 to hit from range, thanks to Khailebron and Lookout Sir, but anything that can get in and take her out is going to put a serious wrinkle in Corey's plans. There might be a possibility of some feck lists, Royal Mordants or so, getting flayers in, getting over the line and taking off the 20 Stalkers. But again, Corey's going to know that, or any good player's going to know that, and deploy the Stalkers back far enough that that will presumably not be a threat if they've screened well. Could have also been another issue in more scenarios with 12-inch deep deployment zones, so there's less flexibility and less depth in the board for Corey to protect his key pieces. So it would have been really interesting to see if you'd played around with some of those variables, but those are some weaknesses or potential ways of countering that list. So that's effectively what I wanted to cover. I've realised I talked for 25 minutes, covered a lot of information. So if I've missed anything, let me know in the comments below. I'm really keen to hear what things that you would have done differently, how you tweak the list, other ways that you could potentially threaten Corey's list or pick it apart, or in particular battle plans. I'd be keen to hear. Now, going forward for future videos, if there's a top tournament list or kind of list archetype that you would like me to break down, get in touch via the comments, let me know and I'll do it. Check out the website, www.aosshorts.com, link below for more information on the Age of Sigmar tournament scene. I have list archives, list comparisons, faction breakdowns, resources such as item and spell cards, so you can remember what you need to know during a game, and a comprehensive single indexed bookmarked FAQ with all of the FAQs in one PDF, so you've got all the rules where you need them. So that's it for now. A number of things to check out in the show notes and a number of things to discuss, so I'm really keen to hear from you guys and hear what you think, so let me know. And until the next video, happy wargaming. Cheers.